Hi, everyone. You should have downloaded the paper that goes along with these notes. You can find it in Canvas, and make sure that the paper that you have has the links to the video. There's some boxes where you're going to write notes as you watch a video, and you need to make sure you've got the links to the video on your document. They are also in this PowerPoint, but that's not going to help you. So go look on Canvas, download your notes first, and once you've got them, you can start playing this video. And feel free to pause at any time. If you need some time to write notes, you can always go back and listen to things again. So here we go. We are talking about agriculture. And I want you to think about your view of a farm. Does it look something like this, with people and animals doing the labor? Maybe you have a view like this, with lots of animals grazing in a pasture, and there's the farmhouse, and a nice farm family with their animals. Or maybe thinking about something like this, with all the people working in the farm and everything looking so beautiful. But you know the reality of what farms look like? It's more like this. It's not animals doing the labor, it's machines. And this is how most animals actually live. They don't even see daylight. And maybe you've passed some feedlots that look like this. You certainly know when you're approaching them from the smell. So I want you to think about what's different, your vision of a farm and the reality of what most farms look like today. What do you think caused the changes? It's something called the Green Revolution. So let's go through some differences in the Green Revolution, and you need to write these down on your notes. So one thing that's different is monocultures. Mono means one. So one type of plant or one type of animal grown. And in the table on your notes, I want you to write down, just pause this video and write down what are the positives and the negatives of growing acres of one crop. So another difference is mechanization. So that means instead of using people and animals for the labor, we use machines. And again, pause the video and write down what are the positives and the negatives of using machines instead of people and animals. Another big change is fertilizer. So what are the positives and the negatives of applying fertilizer? How about pesticides? What are the positives and negatives about pesticides? Irrigation. Write down the positives and the negatives that you can think of. Fossil fuel use. There's a lot of fossil fuels that go into growing food the way we do it today. It's not just the machines that are used to plant the seeds, to harvest the crops. It's also fossil fuels to make the fertilizer, to transport all the food, for the refrigeration, for producing all of the pesticides. So what are the positives and negatives about using lots of fossil fuels? How about high crop, high yield crop varieties? So in the picture, you can see what a difference. There's an old version of wheat in the bottom, and then above that is a newer high yield version. produces a lot more seeds. So what are the positives and negatives of producing plants like this through artificial selection? Artificial selection is when people constantly choose the plants that produce the most seeds. Those are the ones that are used, bred together, and then the next generation pick the ones that produce the most seeds, breed those together. Or animals, the biggest animal with the most muscle tissue, which is what we eat, breed those together, and of their offspring, choose the ones with the most muscle. Now, today, another way that we change crops is through genetically modified organisms. So, what are the positives and negatives about genetically modifying organisms? And if you're not sure what that is, we're going to watch a video in a little bit, so you'll be clear later. And you can come back to your paper and write down the positives and the negatives. So, I want you to pause this video, go to the link, which is on your document, and watch this video, and you're going to write some notes about the video as you're watching it. Here's another site that I want you to go to. It's not a video, but it's a collection of pictures of families from around the world. And in front of them, they have a week's worth of food. And I want you to notice what people in these different countries eat over the course of a week. And write down some notes on in the boxes on your document. Now that video I told you about genetically modifying organisms. So if you don't really know what that is, or maybe you think you know, but you're not sure, watch this video and they will explain exactly what genetically modified food is. And you'll write notes on your document. One very surprising thing is how much food waste there is. All the energy, the resources that go into producing food, and then the amount of food that doesn't even make it to market. And then a lot of food makes it to market, we purchase it, and then we don't eat it all. So watch this video from NPR and write down notes about food waste. Our current food production is just not very good. It's a whole lot cheaper, and that should have been something you wrote down on your paper. For every change that we've made in how we grow food makes the food cheaper. And if you look at what percentage of the income we spend today on food compared to what people spent 40, 50 years ago on food, food is cheaper than ever. And it's because we use so much mechanization and fertilizer and pesticides and monocultures. It makes the food cheap to purchase, but there's a very, very high cost for the environment and also for our health. So how can we do it better? And that's what we're going to focus on throughout the rest of this presentation. So there's something called sustainable agriculture. So we're going to look at some of the practices involved in sustainable agriculture. These are methods that growers use to make the soil healthier, to minimize water use, and to lower the amount of pollution. And the pollution can be fertilizer or it can be pesticides. It can also be sediment, it's like topsoil washing away. So the more that growers use these methods, the more sustainable it is. The one big issue, especially here in California, we've got huge amount of agriculture here. It's water use. When we're talking about irrigation, we're talking about applying water to the soil. And it's actually the largest share of global water use. And something we always think about is how efficient the irrigation systems are. So when we're talking about efficiency, we mean the percentage of water withdrawn out of a body of water, could be a river, a lake, or groundwater, and how much actually makes it to the root of the target plant. That's the efficiency. Most irrigation systems are very inefficient. So only 50%, even less, of the water applied makes it to the crops. So one of the most inefficient ways to water is called flood irrigation. It's an ancient method, and maybe people could have gotten away with it a long time ago when there weren't so many people. But now, with so many people and so much land being used for irrigation, this is terribly inefficient. Lots of evaporation with this. And there's some other problems. It can cause waterlogging of the soil. The roots of plants are living tissue that need oxygen. So when they are immersed in water, they don't get enough oxygen. So this can be a big, big problem. The other thing is natural water has salts in it. So the water's applied and then it evaporates and leaves the salts behind. The more water that you add to a soil, the more salts are going to be left behind. And eventually the soil can get too salty to grow food on. So here's another irrigation method. This is called furrow irrigation. So it's not quite as much water as the flood irrigation, but as you can see in this picture, it's still a lot of water. So channels are dug. There's got to be a slight slope to the field, and the water runs down between the rows of crops. It's only 40 to 60% efficient. So a huge percentage of the water just evaporates away. Much more efficient is drip irrigation, which you can see in this picture. So tubes are placed in the ground, either above ground or below ground, and they deliver water directly to the roots of the plants. So the soil around the plant can be dry, but the water by the roots the soil by the roots will have moisture in it. And this is a very efficient way to water crops. So 90 to 95% efficient. However, it doesn't make sense for all types of crops because, like, let's say it's a wheat field or cornfield where you're going to harvest the crops at the end of the season, and then you might plant a different crop the next season. Or even if you plant the same crop, you've got this big machinery that's running over the tubing. So this isn't really realistic, except for crops that are going to be there for a long time, like an orchard. An apple orchard is there for many, many years. That's a great place to use drip irrigation. Any type of plant that's going to be there for a long time, this makes sense. But so another method that you could use for annual crops is something called center pivot irrigation. And maybe you've been in an airplane and you've looked down and you've seen these round fields. They're using center pivot irrigation. So it's a piece of equipment. It rotates around a single point and it sprays water. It's a way to spray the water, but you can really target the area that you want to spray and just give the plants as much water as they need at that moment. So it's 80% efficient. That's pretty efficient. And here's what I was mentioning before, salinization. When you water the soil, there's always some salts in natural water. And it's going to be left behind. The water will evaporate and the salt is left behind. Eventually, the plants can't grow anymore because in biology we say salt sucks. Salt sucks the water out of cells by osmosis. So actually, if a field gets too salty, like this field in the picture, about the only thing you can do is flood irrigation. You flood the field with lots of water, hoping that it will wash away all these extra salts. And then the problem is all those salts go into, let's say, the river, and the next person who's withdrawing water from the river is getting salty water, and that's going to start accumulating in that person's field. So generally, the more water that you use to irrigate a field, the bigger the chance that salinization is going to occur. The salts are going to accumulate. But if you use less water, it won't, salinization will take longer to happen, or it won't happen at all. Now, there's some other issues that we have here in California. We are using so much groundwater that the land is actually sinking. So I want you to go to this link, it'll be in your document, watch the video and take notes on the table in your document. Another thing that we've done on the west coast of the United States is we withdraw huge amounts of water with dams, with canals to move water from one place to another. So the Great Colorado River actually doesn't even make it to the sea today. So I want you to watch this video and again, take notes about what happens to an area that used to be an amazing delta and now doesn't have any water left. Okay, we're going to stop here and I'm going to make a second video for the rest of the notes. So you can pick that up whenever you're ready. We'll start with soil conservation in the next video.